Yeah, this could definitely be a lot of fun on a tight back road.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I'm here with Yamaha's 2017 SCR950. And this bike, just in my eye, this is a beautiful machine. It's a retro style bike, it's a modern bike, it has modern fuel injection and modern V-twin engine. The Yamaha SCR950 is styled to look like the old flat track racers from Harley Davidson and Honda, and it really just captures that look. Even down to the number plates on the side, the shape of the tank, even the graphics on the tank and on the side here, it just looks really nice. And it's meant to evoke nostalgia, and a lot of your scrambler bikes back in the day, which is what SCR stands for Scrambler, but they had the heat shields on the pipes with the cutouts, and so Yamaha has done just a nice job of little touches throughout the bike, making it look like one of the original Scrambler motorcycles. For those of you who are not familiar with what a Scrambler motorcycle is, in the early 70s through the mid 70s, what the Japanese manufacturers would do to make a Scrambler is they would take one of their street models, they would put knobby tires on it, they would put different exhausts with heat shields. Usually the exhaust came down the side of the bike, and they would also put more of a dirt bike style handlebar on the bike. The manufacturers marketed these bikes as bikes that you could do some light off-roading with. They were predominantly street bikes with knobby tires, and so they weren't really meant to do serious off-roading. And the SCR950 is right in that line. It is really a street bike. It's built on the Yamaha Bolt platform, but they've changed the styling, they've changed the seat, made the seat it's higher off the ground. It's a flat seat, again, to evoke nostalgia. And it's really, though, it's not meant to do serious off-roading. It's meant to do, you know, if you find yourself exploring some back roads and you find a gravel road or a fire road you want to run down, you can certainly do that with this bike, and it'll be happy doing it. But it doesn't have the suspension travel front or back or the lightweight or nimbleness needed to do serious off-roading. I think this bike does a really nice job for what its design purpose is, and again, it's just a street bike that, you know, you can do some occasional off-roading. It's really more a styling exercise as far as the scrambler aspect of it, and I think in that regard, it's a really nice machine. If you've read reviews on the Yamaha Bolt, it's a very similar motorcycle to that. It has the same engine power plant. The rear subframe is a little bit different. The seat's a little bit higher. And for me, I'm a taller rider, and it actually is a little bit more comfortable for me than the Yamaha Bolt is. The 950cc V-twin motor is just a gem. It's always a friendly motor. It's not a domineering motor at all. It's friendly at really any RPM range. It's smooth. It pulls strongly. Maintenance on these things they're a low maintenance bike. Braking power from the single front disc is certainly adequate, but my preference would certainly be, and I know they did it for cost-cutting measures, but my preference would certainly be to have twin disc brakes up in the front. The rear brake performs fine. The one thing I like about this bike is it's a modern bike with just a little bit of character. It's not an electric smooth turbine feeling power plant. It's like I say, it's a friendly V-twin, and that gives it some character. And then also the styling on the bike, I think, just sets this bike apart. So let's ride, and we'll come back and wrap things up.
I am currently riding Yamaha's 2017 SCR950. And first impressions, first getting on it, for me, where I'm used to the foot pegs are in a little bit more forward position than I am used to. That would take me a little bit of getting used to. I'm doing about 50 miles an hour right now in top gear, and roll-on acceleration. It picks up quite nicely without being overbearing. The engine definitely just feels relaxed. And this bike is really not all about performance numbers. It's more about just getting out and enjoying the countryside. It really would be a fantastic bike for exploring some back roads. The way that this motor makes power, it does not pressure you to go fast. Although I'm sure that you could hustle it through some corners if you would like to. The handling is light and easy. It's an easy bike to ride. Yeah, that motor feels nice. I think this bike would be a relatively, if you're a taller person, I think it'd be a pretty decent first bike. Even though it's a 950, it handles very lightly and easily. With the semi-knobby tires, they're great for street use because they're not as likely to lose traction if you hit a little bit of gravel or some loose stones. They give you a lot more confidence on like a gravel road if you live like a gravel lane or something like that. The handlebar layout is nice, it's comfortable. The seat, I've got a lot of options here as far as where I want to sit on it because it's very flat. Transitions very nicely. Brakes are decent. I would prefer a twin caliper setup, but yeah, this could definitely be a lot of fun on a tight back road. Actually has a nice vintage feel to it, just in the way it communicates. It's light enough that it doesn't feel like this bike is... A lot of the newer super sports feel like they're a whole lot better than I am. And this bike is one that I can push on the road at relatively low speed and be pretty comfortable. A little choppy there on and off throttle, especially at low RPM. At lower speed. And I'm getting some vibration through the bars, but it's really nothing annoying. That's a lower frequency vibration that you would get from like a 4-cylinder inline. And I really do like how lightly, I know this isn't a light bike per se, but it really does handle lightly. Handles very nice. And even though this motor doesn't make the ultimate power of, say, a 600cc sport bike, it has such usable torque and low end that even if you're a little bit sloppy on the shifting, it has such a broad spread of usable, streetable power that, again, on a tight back road, I think you could surprise some guys on the super sports. This motor definitely has character. It sounds nice, even with the stock exhaust. I could get some of that V-twin rumble. And even when I'm just going through these corners at low RPM, it just glides through. If I were to compare this bike to, say, like a Triumph Scrambler, one of the earlier ones with the 900cc parallel twin, I like the character of this engine a lot better. This honestly seems a lot like it has a lower center of gravity. I'm really impressed with the way this bike handles. Even though the rear suspension, I'm on a pretty bumpy road, so this will be a good test, but even though the rear suspension doesn't have a ton of travel, the ride really isn't punishing. And at highway speeds, everything is still relatively smooth. It's not too vibey. If you want a hairy-chested wheelie machine, I would suggest getting one of Yamaha's 3-cylinder 900cc bikes. They make several flavors of that, and those things just want to jump out from under you anytime you twist the throttle. And they're a lot of fun, and they really pack a lot of performance. This bike really isn't that way, but it's really entertaining to ride and really enjoyable to ride. I'm actually looking forward to doing a little bit longer ride on this. I would say on Yamaha's 3-cylinder bikes, they have more performance than you can usually use on the street. And I would say the performance of this SCR950 is just, it's very streetable, very usable. And it just, man, it glides through the corners so nicely. And it's just got that rumble, and that you just kind of surf the wave of torque as you accelerate out of the corner. This motor's never peaky, but it's surprising with, even if you, the horsepower numbers really aren't that high, but it is still just a great street motor. Clutch on this bike is light. Just pulls real nice. Long haul comfort wise, the seat, you may want to think about replacing that with a higher quality unit, but it's certainly not the most uncomfortable seat I've ever sat on. It's not terrible. I just think that after several hours you would be, it's a little bit narrow, and something a little bit wider with a little bit better support would be, if you're going to do some touring, it would be a nice option to have.
I'm actually a little bit surprised on this one. This was the first time I've really gotten to put an SCR950 through its paces. I've ridden them before, but never really gotten to push them a little bit on a curvy back road. And I'm really pleasantly surprised at how capable the bike is. The handling on it really is faultless. Very, very nice, and it just goes very well with the relaxed nature of the motor. And just it's honestly pretty fun with the way it picks up out of the corners. The low end torque is just really nice on this bike. As I said on the ride portion of this video, if you want a hairy chested beast, the XSR950 from Yamaha or a Z900 from Kawasaki, you know, those type of bikes have more overall performance, and they really are more akin to a sports standard. This bike is just a little bit different. It has a little bit of retro feel to it. It's never going to wheelie out from under you. That's just not the nature of this machine. It's a more relaxing ride, and it takes a little bit of concentration to go fast, and that's rewarding. It's nice to drive at lower speeds, tighter back roads, and you know, I feel like with the way the suspension handles and everything, you can have a lot of fun below 100 miles an hour on this bike. Really anything above that is kind of pointless on this machine. The SCR950 is a kind of bike that you can do just about any type of riding on. I love the UJMs as anybody who's watched my channel knows, and you know, something that just has broadband usability is to me, it's a really fun place to spend the day. All right, in summary, I would say the high points of Yamaha's SCR950 are, certainly for me, a high point is the styling. I think it's just a great looking machine. And another high point would be the handling on the bike. It really does handle nicely in the corners. I was very, very pleasantly surprised. Just a lot of fun on back roads. Some things that are, I would say, mediocre. The front brake it could be improved upon. The seat comfort, you know, could also be improved upon, but you may, you know, kind of, if you put a wider seat on it, it may intrude into the styling aspect in a way that you don't want. It's a very cleanly styled bike as it is. One area that is somewhat mediocre on the Yamaha SCR950 is the instrumentation, and I'll go ahead and turn the bike on. And what we have here is simply a speedometer. It does have a clock, and it has the odometer and then a trip meter, actually 2 trip meters, but that's it. It also has the oil pressure light, it has a high beam indicator, it has the turn signal indicator, neutral indicator, a check engine light, and a low fuel warning light. But it doesn't have something that I'm just super accustomed to, and that's a tachometer. I'm not sure why. When I'm doing some spirited riding, which you can do on this bike, I just don't like bumping into the rev limiter, and that's really the only way that you know that you're kind of getting to the top end of engine performance on this machine. A fuel gauge would also be a nice feature, and a gear indicator as well. Right now, a lot of bikes, even with the smaller displays like this, have those features incorporated, and it's just a little bit conspicuously lacking here on this bike. What I think would be really cool is to just have a tachometer that kind of swept around the outer edge of this display. And another thing, in certain lighting conditions, this display can be a little bit difficult to read, just the speed. But that's kind of my only real gripe with the bike, is just the simplicity of instrumentation here. Another thing that's mediocre, the absolute power output of this bike it's mediocre. It's nothing to write home about. However, the character of the engine and the torquiness and smoothness of that engine, it really is a pleasure to drive this bike, and it's always willing. It always has plenty of juice out of the corner, no matter how lazy you are with the shifting. And to me, I like a bike that I don't have to be at peak RPM all the time just to get a little bit of power. This thing has a really nice spread of torque and makes it very fun on the street. I'm sure it would be a little boring on the track, but on the street it's a really nice package. The transmission shifts nicely, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought that I would have more issue with the rear suspension travel, but if you're on somewhat smooth, just normal roads, the suspension travel is fine. The ride doesn't beat you up. So overall, I really, really do like the SCR950. It's a great machine. So there you have it. If you're looking for something that has a little bit of retro flavor, a little bit of character, and is just a hoot to ride, the SCR950 might be the bike for you. All right, hope you enjoy. Ride safe.